Welcome to Unpacking Brain Drama. This is your humble host, Pratiti Pathak. Let's see if we are live. I want to check you guys out. Welcome to Unpacking Brain Drama. I am your host, your guide on this amazing journey that we call life in self-discovery, self-empowerment, all the things, personal growth, development in business and in life. I just love being here with you guys, and I'm super excited. I know that I shared with you guys that I launched my book, or I actually published a book as a best-selling author. I was a co-author in a collaborative and anthology. It was amazing. It was emotional. It was just great. And I've never done anything like that. So I can't wait to do more of that. So today, what we are going to be talking about is a little bit of an extension of last week, where we were talking about attachment styles and how that affects us in our love life. Um, and today I want to just welcome you guys to another amazing, like, for me, it's always so transformative every time I even do my own things. But we're going to talk about something that's a little bit of a shift in the way that you see your relationship, and it might shift the way that you see your relationship forever. Okay. And I want to start with this one question. Have you ever been in a relationship or even just a moment in the relationship where you thought, why does this feel so familiar? Even when it doesn't feel that good, right? Huh. Because just what if, what you've been calling love isn't actually love? What if it is actually a pattern that your brain has just learned over the years, right? Because here's the truth, and it might feel here's something that might feel a little uncomfortable, right? And it even might feel like it's a little confronting, but also incredibly freeing, okay? We are not attracted sometimes to what is good for us or even what's healthy, right? We are often attracted to just the familiar, just what we know, right? And familiar doesn't necessarily mean good. It doesn't necessarily mean healthy. It just means this is what we know, right? Your brain, don't forget, it's wired for predictability and familiarity, not perfection, not growth, not evolvement, not success, right? Not healthy. And that doesn't mean that it's never healthy. It just means that that's not what your brain's wired for. It's not your brain's job to make you happy. It's your brain's job to make sure you're safe and that you feel safe. And what your brain learns early on in life is what it continues to recreate in all the areas of your life, including and not limited to your relationships, right? So if you've ever felt if love has ever felt inconsistent or overwhelming or distant or disconnected or something you had to earn, right? Your brain may now associate those feelings with connection. Not because it's what you want, but it's because it's what your brain recognizes, right? And that's the most important part. Now, this doesn't mean this is who you are, okay? Here's where I want you to take just a deep breath with me because this is important, okay? Just pause and take a breath. This is not who you are. This is a pattern your brain has learned, right? And what it learns is brilliant, right? Anything that we've learned, here's the good news. We can unlearn, right? So whatever your brain has learned, it can be unlearned. And more powerfully, it can be relearned intentionally, right? Sometimes we learn and unlearn things But when we're intentional about it, it's way more powerful, and we're actually relearning something all over again. Think about when people have gotten into accidents or had a stroke or had something happen where they may have been paralyzed for a moment, but now they have to relearn how to write or relearn how to read, right? Or relearn even how to speak. Okay? When we're relearning something, we're doing it on purpose. We're aware. It's thoughtful learning, right? Most people go through life thinking this is just how it is, right? And in relationships, they may be just thinking this is just how I am in relationships, right? I'm just emotional. I'm just sensitive. How many times have you said that or heard somebody else say, I'm just sensitive? Well, that's something that you've learned to be. You don't have to stay being sensitive. You don't have to stay being emotional. It doesn't mean that you decide, I'm just not going to be emotional anymore. I'm going to remove emotion out of everything. No, but when you're saying it, you're saying I'm over emotional. Like I'm more emotional than most people, right? I'm just guarded because twice shy, once bitten, twice shy, right? Just overthink, right? No, you're not just anything, right? You've been practicing a behavior, you've been practicing a pattern, a habit, right? That's where habits become patterns, right? And a pattern is something that's learned. So a pattern can be changed, right? And that is just the truth of it. What you used to do when you were 5 years old, you don't do now. Once upon a time, you may have had a pattern of sucking your thumb or on a pacifier, and you unlearned that and you stopped, right? You once upon a time drank out of a bottle and then switched over to a big girl, big boy cup, right? So patterns can be changed, which is a beautiful thing, right? We're always talking about autopilot. That's all of this is all the same stuff, right? So when you get triggered, it's just because that's an automatic reaction. That's what a trigger is. So, what happens when you get triggered? Let's talk about what actually happens in real time, okay? Because this is where your power lies, okay? Something happens, there's a circumstance, there's a situation that happens in a relationship, okay? Maybe it's a text that isn't returned, right? Nobody, somebody didn't respond to your text, right? Maybe it's a tone shift, right? Maybe somebody pulls away or someone gets too close, and instantly your brain creates a thought around it, right? Something like they're losing interest. They don't care about me. This is too much. I need to get out of this. That thought is what creates, as you know, if you hang with me, those thoughts create how you feel, right? So it makes sense that if you're thinking like, oh my God, they're losing interest, it's going to create anxiety, right? It's going to create fear. It's going to create overwhelm. And if you're thinking, I need to get out of this, this is too much, it's also going to create overwhelm. It's going to create pressure, right? That feeling of pressure, that feeling of suffocated. Did you ever have anybody say to you, I need space? I feel suffocated? That's what that is, right? And from that feeling, they're going to behave a certain way, right? They're going to have an action around it. They're going to have an inaction. Maybe it's avoidance or a reaction, like I need to call you 10,000 times, right? You might do things like over explain, right? Because you're trying to prove your worthiness. You might seek reassurance, right? And feel like you need to uh, overreact just so that you can get some reassurance. Maybe if you're like, this is too much, maybe you might shut down. Maybe you might withdraw or become defensive, right? Or try to control the situation. How many of us do that? I know I could put both hands up. Tried to control the situation. More importantly, we've tried to control the other person in the situation, right? And if we could control other people, I would be all in on that. I totally want to control some people, though I don't think that's a thing. Usually, the exact thing that you're trying to avoid, more distance, more confusion, more disconnection, is the exact thing that you actually create, right? Because what's happening here, it's a pattern loop, right? I've talked about a thought loop, a thought error loop, a pattern loop. This is all of the same things. So let's just slow this down for a moment because this is your brain on autopilot, right? That thought, feeling, action, result. There's a situation, we have a thought about it, and then that creates an emotion, right? And then we execute and we create a result. That is my steer framework right there, STEER. Okay. Or in your everyday life, it's trigger, story, emotion, reaction, outcome, right? However you want to say it, you're creating a story around it. And here's the key. The pattern, I know you're going to be like, what? The pattern is not the problem. The unconscious pattern is the problem. Okay. Autopilot is a beautiful thing. It's when we're doing it without wanting to be doing it, right? That's the pattern. The unconscious pattern is the autopilot, and it's when the autopilot is something you don't want to be on autopilot about, right? Because when you don't see it, you can't change it, right? The first part of anything is what? Awareness. And it was just 11:11. There you have it. The emotional truth is this. Okay, here's what I want to offer you. It's something so powerful. Okay, you're not choosing the person. Wait, what? When you're in a relationship or you're looking for a relationship, you're not actually choosing that person. And that is going to blow your mind right now. What you're actually choosing is the feeling that your brain recognizes when you're with this type of person. Does that make sense? Let me say that again. You're not actually choosing like that guy or that gal. You're choosing someone who creates this same feeling for yourself that your brain recognizes. So let that sink in for a moment, okay? Because sometimes what we think is chemistry or what we feel like chemistry is actually familiarity. Now, don't get me wrong. Familiarity can feel wonderful until it doesn't, right? Sometimes what we feel like as connection is just your nervous system saying like, oh, wait, this, I recognize this. This seems familiar. I've been here before, right? Even if it didn't feel good, it's definitely something my body knows and my nervous system knows, and I know very well. And here's the other thing is sometimes we feel these things. It didn't go well the last time, but we think depending on our pattern style, right? That we've done something wrong. This was somehow our fault. We're the ones to blame, or that was just that guy. This guy's going to be different, or this girl's going to be different. And you always want to shift that because you really don't want to be in this pattern, but you're in it and you don't know how to get out of it. And mainly it's only because you weren't even aware that you were in a pattern, right? So, but now that you see the pattern, you have a choice, right? This is what I call the steel trap versus the steer framework that I've created, right? Steel, STEAL, is the autopilot living, right? This is when your thoughts run unconsciously, your emotions take over, your reactions are automatic, and your pattern steals your power. Okay? You're not choosing it, you're reacting. Okay? Now, when you live intentionally and you get into the steer framework, STEER, this is where you step back into the driver's seat, right? You notice the trigger, you observe the thought, you feel the emotion without reacting, and then you consciously choose your response. Okay, that's when you begin to steer your life, your relationship on purpose, right? And when you practice that enough times, that becomes the new autopilot, the new pattern that actually creates what you really do want, right? What does that look like in real life? Okay, let's make this real. Instead of they're pulling away, something's wrong, you get to pause and ask yourself, what am I thinking right now? Okay, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, right? What am I feeling? How's that making me feel? What is this? What am I making all of this mean? Right? And then what would intentional look like right here? Like, okay, oh gosh, this is what I always think. I always go to thinking this, and I always like feel terrible when I think this. And I always make it mean that, they're probably being sneaky. They're probably not telling the truth. I've been lied to a million times. Like, whatever that story is that you're telling yourself, right? What would it look like if I chose to say stop and be more intentional about what I'm looking at here? What would intentional look like? Maybe intentional would look more like communicating calmly instead of erupting like a volcano, right? Maybe it would look like giving space without panic. You're probably still going to panic a little bit inside, okay? But outwardly, you do something different. Maybe you express a need clearly instead of just keeping it to yourself because you're worried about the other person's reaction. Or maybe it's just simply not reacting at all, right? Just in the moment, not doing anything. Sometimes we're so quick to react to something. That pause is literally where your power lies. Okay? This is where your power lives. This is where you live in your power. However you want to look at that. Okay? Compassion, choosing compassion over judgment. And I want to say that clearly, okay? Because there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing broken about you. And there's lots of times that you totally feel broken when things happen. Okay. You feel like because you feel like breaking down, right? But your brain did exactly what it was designed to do, which is why you automatically have these thoughts, these feelings, these reactions, but nothing's gone wrong. This is just literally like, how you have to update the software back in the day when GPS was new to automobiles. There was a system in there, and I remember that the dealership let me know that there was an upgrade. I needed to update the software, right? I needed to upgrade and update the software. That's all that's happening here. We just need to update our software, right? That's our program. It's built in. We built it. But now we have new awareness, so we have to update that software. So your brain didn't break on you. It did exactly what it was designed to do. It learns how to protect you. But what once protected you may now be limiting you, right? Which is why we have to update that software to say, no, 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 nothing's gone wrong here. We don't need to limit ourselves. And that new awareness is what allows you to make changes, shift patterns, and evolve, right? Growing through all the things that we go through. So let's just have a moment of reflection, okay? I want you to ask yourself, and I'll leave you with this one with a few questions, okay? And I want you to just sit with these, maybe journal on them, get curious, right? Not critical, just ask yourself simple questions, okay? Here they are. Where does my life feel familiar? Or where in my life does familiar feel like love? You can, I'm not asking anybody to blow up their relationship. I'm asking you to get curious, not critical, like where in my relationship does familiar actually feel like love? What are some patterns that keep repeating in my relationships? Right? Do we keep falling in love with the same type of man or woman? Does the same thing happen over and over? Some familiar patterns that show up every single time? When I feel triggered, what am I afraid might happen? That's a really, really good one, right? When I feel triggered, what am I afraid might happen? And what would it look like to respond to a situation instead of reacting to it? So here's the four questions again, okay? Where in my life does familiar feel like love? What patterns keep repeating in my relationships? When I feel triggered, what am I afraid might happen? And what would it look like to respond instead of react? I would write them down. This is a live recording, but once I jump off of here, you'll be able to access this afterwards. Write them down, journal on them, think on them, reflect on them, right? Love is not meant to feel like survival. And I don't know about you guys, but for me, that is totally what it has felt like throughout my life. It had just felt like surviving. Did you ever catch yourself saying, I just feel like my life is like one thing after another. It's always something. Love should not feel like survival. It isn't meant to feel like survival. It's meant to feel like safety. It's meant to feel secure. It's meant to really feel like love, right? Safety. When you feel safe with somebody, and I know this because people feel safe when they come to me and talk to me about anything. That has always been so natural for me to make people feel safe, to open up and be vulnerable with me. That's why coaching comes so naturally to me. But love should feel like that. Like you could openly go to your person and share anything, and it isn't going to be something that turns into turmoil, something that gets used against you later as a weapon, right? And that doesn't mean that it's perfect, and doesn't mean that love is meant to be perfect by any means. You're still going to have the normal human interaction. You're always going to disagree about something. You're not meant to agree on everything. It's not when people say like, "Oh, the person that you should be with is the person that can like finish your sentences." No, that just means they're like you're a robot and so are they. Like, of course, they're going to learn how to finish your sentences because they've learned your patterns, right? But love is meant to feel safe, not perfect, and it's meant to feel intentional, right? It's meant to feel like warmth and love. So when you begin to understand your patterns, you stop living your relationships by default, right? You start creating them by design, right? Last thing, you don't need to find better love. You need to become more intentional in how you experience it. Okay. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear this information. I know I wish I would have heard information like this years and years ago. And if you're part of our book club, Growth Beyond the Pages, we're diving deeper and deeper into these conversations this month. This is our last week coming up. And next month, we're actually going to be doing The Body Keeps Score, and I'm super excited about that. So until next time, Trailblazers, remember this. When whatever we focus on expands, and we always have a choice on what we want to focus on. So I will see you guys next week in this episodes of Unpacking Brain Drama.